Welcome in, basketball fans, to NBA Now from Chat Sports. I'm your host, Jimmy Crowther of All Things Mavs, talking to you about, of course, all things Dallas Mavericks basketball. And today, we're going to be discussing what the Dallas Mavericks should do with each pick should they be so lucky to land in the top 5 of the NBA draft. Now, I say top 5, of course, because let me remind you, the Dallas Mavericks did trade that top 5 protected pick to the Atlanta Hawks when they made the Luca Doncic Trae Young swap, which of course I think we all can agree was more than worth it. Now, as it currently stands, the Dallas Mavericks have a 29% chance to land in the top 4. And it's kind of weird, with the new NBA draft lottery system, only the bottom 5 teams have a chance at that 5th overall spot. So basically, the Mavs' chances to keep their pick narrows even more, and they have to just keep it in the top 4, which, like I said, they have the 29% chance to do. They're currently tied with Memphis for the 7th best odds, and they obviously have the 2 games remaining against the Phoenix Suns, which of course will be Dirk's potential final home game, and the game on the road against the San Antonio Spurs. So they could end up, depending on how the rest of the season goes between them and the rest of the lottery teams, they could end up as high as the 6th best odds, and they could end up as low as the 9th best odds. So let's say they get to the 6th best, that would give them a 37.2% chance to land in the top 4. And if they drop to the 9th best odds, they have a 20.3% chance to land in the top 4. So, big difference there, big gap. Neither of them really play into their favor, but they have a chance. Can they finally get some lottery luck? There hasn't been a lot of lottery luck in Dallas, but if they do, let's dive in and discuss what they'll do with each pick. The first overall pick, what else would they do? They're taking Zion Williamson. Any team that lands at the number 1 spot is taking Zion Williamson. You don't trade the pick, you don't take MORANT, you take Zion, and you don't look back. So what are the chances they actually get that pick? Well, right now it's a 6.7% chance. And you say, God, 6.7 is kind of low. Well, yes, it is. But the bottom 3 teams only have a 14% chance to land that number 1 pick. So it's really not that far off. They have a halfway decent chance. And like I said, if they get it, they're picking Zion. So let's just daydream here and just talk about what that would look like. So like I said, only pick you don't have to think twice about, because here's his stats. 22.6 points per game, 8.9 rebounds per game, 2.1 assists, and of course he wasn't shooting the 3 a whole lot with that big body. He could just bully anyone down low, but he did shoot at 33.8% when he was spotting up. He looked like a pretty decent 3-point shooter. So last year, obviously the Mavs picked the most experienced, most NBA-ready rookie in Luca Doncic from a skill set standpoint, right? Well, now, let's say they get that number 1 pick, Zion Williamson comes in as the most NBA-ready rookie from a physical standpoint. I mean, this man is an absolute unit. There's just no other way around it. So let's take a look at his measurements. 6'7", obviously a little small on the small side for a height standpoint as a power forward or a big man, but 285 pounds. He would come in as the 2nd heaviest player in the NBA right off the bat, behind one guy, Boban Marjanovic, who is 7'3", and he weighs 290 pounds. That's crazy. But you know what Boban can't do? He can't jump 45 inches in the air like Zion Williamson can. Now, Zion also has that 6'10" wingspan, which is going to be huge. And just imagine if you put him in that Dallas Mavericks starting 5. Are you kidding me? I wouldn't hesitate to say the Mavericks become an automatic top 5 team in the West if they put Zion Williamson in and don't do anything else the rest of the summer. So let's look at what that starting 5 could be. So here's how I have it right now. I think some things could change around. This is, of course, assuming they add Zion. Point guard, Jalen Brunson. Incredible 2nd-round steal for the Dallas Mavericks. Shooting guard, Tim Hardaway Jr., and I'll come back around to that because I could see him also playing a 6-man role. You put Luca Doncic at the 3, obviously he's going to be handling the ball the most in that lineup. You put Zion Williamson at the 4 and Kristaps Porzingis at the 5. And that big 3 of Luca, Zion, and Porzingis is going to strike fear into the hearts of the NBA. I mean, it would be incredibly fun to watch. Whether you're a Dallas Maverick fan or not, that would be a fun team to watch, okay? Imagine the lobs Luca throws to Zion in transition, and then the lobs he throws to Porzingis also down low. I mean, That would be insane. So let me talk about Tim Hardaway Jr. for a second. Let me just go back to that. I do think there's some flexibility with that 2-3 slot. Let's say they bring back Finney Smith. You put Luca at the 2, Finney Smith at the 3, Tim Hardaway Jr. off the bench. Tim Hardaway obviously was frustrating for some fans to watch. I get that. He was chucking up some bad shots, some low basketball IQ shots. But at the end of the day, Tim Hardaway Jr.'s role is going to change a lot with this team next year, and I truly believe that he is going to have a better role, and he's going to really help this team in the end. So that was the number 1 pick. We know what they're going to do if they get lucky enough to land that. But what would they do with the number 2 pick? I think this is where things get interesting. Now, they have a 7% chance to land the number 2 pick. Again, not super high, but still, there's a chance, right? So I think there's 3 directions the Dallas Mavericks could go should they land that number 2 pick. And I think from a player standpoint, you look at guys like RJ Barrett, Ja Morant. But I think the most likely thing that they do, or the best option they have, is to trade that pick and get a package of players, right? So let's start with the least likely, or the, in my opinion, worst scenario for the Mavs to go with this number 2 pick, and that's RJ Barrett. Now, I'm not going to say that RJ Barrett is a bad basketball player. I think he's incredible. I think he would be great on a lot of teams that are in the lottery. But I just don't think he would be great on this Dallas Maverick team. I think he accumulated a lot of unnecessary hate from basketball fans just watching him in the tournament with Duke. But like I said, he's not a fit here. He needs the ball in his hands to succeed, and we already know the guy that's going to have the ball in his hands with this Dallas Maverick team is Luca Doncic. We already know that. But let's take a look at his stats. 22.6 points per game, 7.6 rebounds per game, 4.3 assists, and then 30.8% from the three-point line. And that's where I think he hurts the Mavs the most. The Mavs need a spot-up shooter next to Luca. They need shooters around Luca and KP. And RJ Barrett isn't that. RJ Barrett's going to get you a bucket by going to the basket, right? Now, and that's just not what they need. It's weird. The Mavericks are in a really weird position. Lottery teams don't really very often draft for need, but the Mavs can with Porzingis and Luca. They're going to make a playoff push, and you can draft for need. And RJ Barrett is not a guy the Mavs need in this Dallas Maverick offense. So let's look at my second middle ground kind of guy that I'd be okay with, and that's Ja Morant. Now, in my opinion, Morant is the second most talented player in this draft. I think, first of all, it's Zion Williamson, 120%, like I already said. But I think Morant really separated himself. I think he made himself the clear-cut number 2 overall pick for the NBA draft. But let's look at his stats. 24.5 points per game, 10 assists per game, 5.7 rebounds, and he shot 36.3 from 3. So he is a good shooter, right? But like Barrett, Morant does need the ball in his hands to succeed. He's a point guard, and he's a ball-dominant point guard. Obviously, he can pass at 10 assists per game. That's like not even a question. And he would be a lot of fun to watch, right? He's going to be super explosive. I'm going to be rooting for this guy coming out of Murray State. I would love to see him on a team like Phoenix with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. Not sure where he's going to land, but wherever he lands, he's going to be successful. I just don't think it's the Mavericks' best option. Because, so here's the thing. A lot of people are comparing him to Dennis Smith Jr. just because he's explosive, but he is head and shoulders above Dennis Smith Jr. coming out of college. Better passer, better shooter. I'd even argue a better defender. But still, he needs the ball in his hands to succeed, and he's a point guard, right? We kind of have our point guard in Luca Doncic. Morant's just not going to be the best option for the Mavs at the number 2 pick. So you say, okay, well, who else is left? There's no other good players left. First of all, that's not true. Second of all, you trade the pick, okay? The Mavs can package this together and get a heck of a haul for this number 2 pick. So let's take a look at what I think some options could be for trading that second overall pick. Now, I know it's going to be hard for some fans to swallow, like, okay, we haven't had the number 2 pick in quite some time. Like, we're just going to give it away. No, we're going to talk about some options here. So, first thing, I think you call up the Boston Celtics. Now, they have 3 first-round picks, right? They're going to be looking to move at least 1 or 2 of those, I would imagine. So, here's my potential trade that the Mavs and the Celtics could throw together. So Boston has Sacramento's overall pick, which right now is projected to be the 14th pick in the draft. So a lottery pick, right? And they also have their own pick, which right now is projected around number 22. So we get those two in return. They have one other pick, but I think these would be the two most likely that they trade. So we get those two in return. We give them the second overall pick. No players exchanged in the trade. And here's what it does for Boston. If Kyrie Irving leaves, which right now all signs are pointing to him going to New York, then Boston gets Ja Morant to pair with a guy like Jason Tatum and even Jaylen Brown, and they continue to build around a young core. And that's exciting, right? Like that gives Boston a lot of hope. That's a lot more than they're going to be able to get from the 14th or 21st or 22nd, overall pick. So what does Dallas get out of it? They're giving up the number 2 pick, right? Well, they get 2 role players in 14 and 22 that they don't have to invest a whole lot of time or money into like they would the number 2 overall pick. Guys like Bol Bol, Rui Hachimura from Gonzaga, or Nasir Little from North Carolina. Those could be guys you get at the 14th overall pick, so still in the lottery. And then you look at the 22nd pick and guys like Cam Johnson from North Carolina or PJ Washington from Kentucky, who just declared would be excellent fits on this Dallas Maverick team. So my second trade idea, this one comes from the Memphis Grizzlies. And the Mavs get Mike Conley, one of the most underrated point guards in the NBA, right? From a defensive standpoint, incredible. Now, I know he's older, and that's a problem, but let me first tell you what I think we would have to give Memphis, and that's obviously the second pick. And then I think you give Tim Hardaway Jr., so that way they have to eat his contract, because that is not a friendly contract. And also, it's a little bit of talent. I mean, he's still 27 years old. He can still play. He's a good basketball player. But for the most part, that is a, hey, we'll give you the second pick if you give us Conley and eat this contract for us. From a skill set standpoint, Conley is a dream pairing next to Luca. With his defense, he shot 36% from 3. I know he's 31 years old, and with 3 years left on his contract, obviously he'll be 34 at the end of this, and that's tough, but we're going to be making a playoff push, and you got to have talented veterans around Luca and around Porzingis, and I think that would be important. So what does Memphis gain? Well, they already have a pick in the lottery, most likely. If it falls out of the top 8, they lose their pick. But right now, they're projected to land in the top 7, so they're okay. But you get the second overall pick. You get Ja Morant. You put him next to Jaren Jackson Jr., for crying out loud. And you just embrace this rebuild in Memphis, and you go all in with your main guys being Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. And they get an older Mike Conley off their books. And like I said, they buy in 110% to this rebuild, which they kind of already did after they traded Marc Gasol to Toronto. But with a guy like Morant and then whoever they get with that 6th or 7th pick, they're going to be sitting pretty for a rebuild in Memphis. Now, here's the trade that I would most like to see happen, and I think most Mavs fans would agree with me here, and that is a trade worked out with the Washington Wizards where the Mavs receive Bradley Beal. That's right, the Florida product, and I think he's on the block. I'm not going to say that for sure. He doesn't want to go anywhere apparently, but look, if Washington is going to be in the dumps next year, which they look to be with John Wall sidelined with an injury, they're going to need to embrace a rebuild too. And like Memphis, they already have a lottery pick. They're going to end up in the lottery. Right now they're projecting top 7 as well, I believe. So here's what the trade would be. Bradley Beal for, again, the second overall pick and Tim Hardaway Jr. Now the Mavs have a trade exception. They wouldn't have to give a player. They could eat that contract of Bradley Beal's, but give up Tim Hardaway, get that contract off your books, get Bradley Beal, and right away, this lets Washington, again, another team, go into full rebuild mode, take Ja Morant, develop him, take that other lottery pick, develop whoever that turns into, and all of a sudden, you know, you've got some young talent to start building around, right? And on the other hand, let's say they get Hardaway Jr., he could be a guy that steps in for Bradley Beal in the starting lineup as a 2-guard. So they're not just walking away with nothing. As a player standpoint, they still get Hardaway Jr. and they get that second pick, and the Mavs get freaking Bradley Beal. Beal comes in and he is the dream spot-up shooter next to Luca, who he can feed, and Mavs can finally have someone that can consistently knock down a 3-point jumper. And that's exactly what Bradley Beal brings you. So that's why I think, in my opinion, this would be the perfect trade to get going for the Dallas Mavericks. Another thing about getting Bradley Beal is that he becomes a second playmaker next to Luca. Unfortunately for Dallas, their second best playmaker right now is Jalen Brunson, who, like I said, I absolutely love, and I think he is just becoming one of the most underrated players already out of this draft. He was a great value, but if you're going to make a playoff push, your second best playmaker cannot be Jalen Brunson. It needs to be a guy like Bradley Beal. So like I said, second overall pick, Tim Hardaway Jr. to Washington. The Mavs get Bradley Beal, and you make the playoff push. So, before I get into what I think the Mavs should do with the number 3 or number 4 pick, should they get so lucky to land there, I just want to remind y'all that you can find all the best Dallas Mavericks and NBA content on Chat Sports YouTube. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button right after this video, and then also give me a follow on Twitter at all_things_Mavs to keep up with the Dallas Mavericks. So let's talk about it. Number 3 or number 4. They have a 7.4% chance to land the number 3 pick and a 7.8% chance to land the number 4 pick. And I think both of those picks and both of those spots in the draft put the Mavs in a very similar situation. Obviously, the top 3 most talented players are probably going to be off the board. Excuse me, the top 2 most talented players are obviously going to be off the board in Zion and Morant. So then that probably leaves you with guys like RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish. I don't think RJ Barrett is a fit, like I said. And I'm not high on Cam Reddish. He came in, 3-point shooting was supposed to be his thing, and he just did not produce. So, skip those 2. Let's take a look at what else I think they should do. Now, first of all, I think they need to call and try to make some trades. But once it gets past the top 2, I don't think you're going to get the same haul for that pick that you would at the number 2 overall spot. So, then you start looking at players. And these aren't going to be the sexy names like Zion or Ja Morant or even RJ Barrett. No, we're going to start by looking at 3 guys. DeAndre Hunter, Jarrett Culver, and Brandon Clarke. All 3 of which are going to be incredible NBA talents that people are already beginning to overlook. So, let me start number 1. I think I'm going to start with who I think they should hold back from and then move into who my top target would be at the number 3 pick. So, number 1. Brandon Clarke, 16.9 points per game, 8.6 rebounds per game, 3.1 blocks per game. He's the Gonzaga product. He is an incredible finisher around the rim, and he steps in and can probably be your starting power forward from day 1. Now, his only downside is that he is 22 years old, so he's obviously one of the older guys. But I don't see that as a downside for the Dallas Mavericks. They want and they like these older guys to come in and be able to produce right away. And that's what Clarke is going to bring the Dallas Mavericks with rebounding and his defensive ability down low. Now, second guy I want to look at, Jarrett Culver out of Texas Tech. Obviously led Tech to the national championship. Couldn't produce in the final. Virginia pulled that out. But let's look at what Jarrett Culver did this year for the Red Raiders. 18.6 points per game, 6.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists per game, and then 1.4 steals per game. He's got the NBA body. He's going to be a good wing defender. He's just not a good 3-point shooter. And like I said, I think that's what the Mavericks need the most. That plus defense. So I give him the edge on the defensive end, but the 3-point shooting is a bit for me, and I think for a lot of Mavs fans. I was really high on Culver coming into the tournament. I'm still high on Culver. I would absolutely love to see him in a Dallas Maverick uniform, and not just because he is a Texas native, but because I genuinely think he will be an incredible NBA player. But he's going to take more time to develop than my number 1 guy at the number 3 pick, and that is DeAndre Hunter. Now, before the national championship, like I said, Jarrett Culver was my guy that I wanted if the Mavericks land here. But after seeing what he did in the national championship, locking down Culver and knocking down 3-point shots like it was nothing, I'm officially convinced that he would be perfect in Dallas. So in that national championship, he put up 27 points, 9 rebounds, knocked down the 4 3-pointers. Like I said, put the clamps on Jarrett Culver, who shot 5 of 22 from the field. Now, I know I sound like a broken record, but these 3 guys are all great defenders, but DeAndre Hunter might be the best of the 3. He's a dream 3-and-D player for the Dallas Mavericks. He shot 42% from 3 all season long. He can defend the 2-guard, the small forward, or the power forward. And being a Virginia product, you already know that Rick Carlisle is going to be eager to implement him into this Dallas Mavericks system. Like I said, I think he can start at the 2 or the 3, depending on what Dallas needs after free agency. So, if the Mavs land 1, they're taking Zion. If they land 2, I think they look to trade the pick. I'd be more happy if they traded the pick, but I think Morant could also be a fit there. 3 or 4, like I said, I think they call about trades, don't see anything that wows them, and end up taking a guy like Brandon Clarke, Jarrett Culver, or fingers crossed, DeAndre Hunter. But I want to remind you of something. Don't stress if the Dallas Mavericks don't get a pick in this lottery. This Dallas team is set. Arguably, they're more set than any other team in the lottery right now. When all is said and done, Dallas is going into this summer with just an incredible situation. They have a perennial all-star in Luca Doncic, ready to fight for that playoff spot in his second year. They'll have a healthy Kristaps Porzingis, who's already said he feels better than he did before the injury. And then they have a heck of a ton of cap space that they're going to go spend on big-name free agents like Nikola Vucevic, like Kemba Walker, like Kevin Durant maybe? Who knows? We'll see. It's going to be a crazy summer. Whether they get a pick or not, I wouldn't stress too much about it. Just think of it as a little sweetener if they do. I want to thank y'all for tuning in again to NBA Now from Chat Sports with all the latest Dallas Mavericks news and rumors. I'm your host, Jimmy Crowther of All Things Mavs. Give me a follow on Twitter and make sure you hit that subscribe button at the end of this video. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.